I had 30 seconds before he pulled the ring from his pocket and destroyed both our lives forever. My hand shook just enough to spill champagne on the white tablecloth as I watched Dante Moretti cut through the crowd. The crystal felt too delicate for this moment, like it might shatter before he reached me. Around me, the Venetian Hotel's grand ballroom hummed with the low frequency of power. Crystal against porcelain, muted negotiations, the whisper of silk against Italian wool. Outside, the city glittered with oblivious normalcy. But in here, everything was dangerous, too dangerous, suffocating. I watched him approach like I was watching my own execution unfold in slow motion. Dante moved through the crowd with predatory grace, his Tom Ford tuxedo fitting him like armor. Sharp jawline catching the chandelier light, dark hair perfectly styled, the kind of controlled elegance that came from 3 generations of violence dressed up as respectability. His hand rested at his side, fingers flexed once, a tell I'd learned to recognize over 3 years of secret nights. Beside me, Judge Morrison leaned in close, saying something about hospital funding. Her diamond bracelet caught the light, throwing fractured rainbows across the charity auction catalog. She looked like a woman making innocent small talk. She was. But 30 feet away, Marco Vitali watched from his table with hooded eyes and a smile that promised consequences. He'd been watching me all night, and I knew what that meant in Dante's world. Someone had told him about us. The secret I'd kept for 3 years, the trauma surgeon sleeping with the Mafia boss whose soldiers filled her operating room, was about to be exposed in the most spectacular way possible. Because I knew that look on Dante's face. The cold calculation before he made moves that changed the game. The absolute certainty before he did something that couldn't be undone. My pager vibrated against my hip. Another gunshot victim en route to St. Michael's. Probably one of his men. Probably from Marco's recent territorial challenges that were filling my ER with bodies and questions I couldn't answer. I should leave. Should return to the hospital where I belonged, to the sterile world of trauma bays and surgical protocols that made sense. But Dante was already reaching our table, his hand extending toward mine, and 500 pairs of eyes were turning to watch. "Dr. Russo," he said, voice carrying that dangerous edge I'd only heard in private. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow, curious but not alarmed. She didn't know she was sitting beside a woman who'd been living a double life for 3 years. Who'd stitched up bullet wounds without asking questions. Who'd fallen in love with a man whose last name meant fear in certain neighborhoods. I took his hand because refusing would have been worse. Would have confirmed whatever suspicions Marco was building. Would have started the war we'd been avoiding. The orchestra was playing something classical and elegant. Vivaldi, maybe, or Corelli. Music for people who didn't know that half the men in this room had ordered deaths before dessert. Dante pulled me close on the dance floor, closer than appropriate for public, and I felt something in his jacket pocket press against my ribs. A small box. Velvet. Unmistakable. "What are you doing?" I whispered, my surgeon's training the only thing keeping my voice steady. "Saving your life," he replied, spinning me with controlled precision. "Marco knows about us. He's planning to use you against me. To kill you to prove I'm vulnerable." My breath caught. "So your solution is to make you untouchable. Under family law, harming a boss's fiancé means war with everyone. You're safer as my wife than my secret. Dante, we can't." But he was already pulling away. Already dropping to one knee in the center of the ballroom as the orchestra's notes faded into shocked silence. 500 people watching. Senators and CEOs and crime bosses and rival underbosses who'd been waiting for Dante to show weakness. And me, standing there in a red dress that suddenly felt like a target, watching the man I loved propose in a room full of people who would use this moment to measure, calculate, and plan. The ring box opened, and even from here I could see it was real. An emerald-cut diamond that probably cost more than my medical school debt, set in platinum that caught the light like a weapon. "Sophia Russo," Dante said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "I've loved you for 3 years in secret. I'm done hiding. Marry me. This wasn't romance. This was strategy. Protection. A calculated move to save my life by binding it to his forever. But his hand was shaking. And his eyes, God, his eyes, held something raw and real beneath the calculation. Every instinct I'd honed as a doctor screamed at me to run. This world only ended one way. In violence. In blood on my table. In choices that no amount of medical training prepared you for. I opened my mouth to say no, to save us both from the disaster this would become. Yes, I heard myself say instead. And just like that, I stopped being the secret and became the target. Mako's smile widened from across the room. The crowd erupted in applause that sounded like artillery fire. And Dante slid the ring onto my finger. A beautiful prison I'd just agreed to wear for the rest of what would probably be a very short life. The diamond felt heavy on my finger. Heavier than any object that small should feel. Dante stood, pulling me into an embrace that looked tender but felt like armor. His lips brushed my ear as cameras flashed around us. "Smile," he murmured. "You just became the most protected woman in the city. And the most valuable target." I smiled because 500 people were watching. Because Judge Morrison was clapping with genuine delight. Because Senator Caruso was already moving toward us to offer congratulations, his wife beaming like we were just another couple in love. We weren't. We were a tactical move. A declaration. A line drawn in blood-soaked sand. The congratulations came in waves. Hospital board members who'd sat on panels with me, praising my dedication while having no idea I'd been treating their charity gala hosts' gunshot wounds in secret for 3 years. Politicians who'd shaken Dante's hand for campaign donations, not understanding they'd just witnessed a mafia boss claim his queen in front of everyone who mattered. "Dr. Russo, I had no idea you two were seeing each other," Dr. Patricia Reeves said, her smile tight. My mentor. The woman who'd championed my career. I could already see the calculations behind her eyes. The scandal, the liability, the questions about how long I'd known what Dante really was. "It's been recent," I lied smoothly, the way I'd been lying for 3 years. "Very private." "Not anymore." Patricia's gaze dropped to the ring. Quite the statement. That's exactly what it was. A statement written in diamonds and desperation. Dante's hand never left my waist as we moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations that ranged from genuine to calculating to openly hostile. I watched faces I'd seen in my ER. Men with bullet wounds they'd claimed were accidents, women with injuries that told stories of violence they'd never report. They all knew now. The doctor who'd treated them without asking questions was the boss's woman. Had been all along. Across the ballroom, Marco Vitali held court at his table, surrounded by men whose loyalty Dante couldn't count on. Marco raised his champagne glass in our direction, the gesture looking celebratory to anyone who didn't know better. I knew better. I'd sutured the results of Marco's ambition too many times not to recognize a threat when I saw one. "He's going to kill me anyway," I said quietly as we moved toward the exit, the weight of stairs following us like crosshairs. "This just makes it more public when he does." "No." Dante's voice was cold, certain. "This makes it war if he touches you. Marco's ambitious, but he's not stupid enough to unite every family against him." "You're betting my life on that?" "I'm betting our lives on it." He guided me through the double doors into the cool night air where his car waited, flanked by men whose guns were barely concealed beneath expensive suits. Because the moment he knew about you, your life was already forfeit. This way, at least you have the protection of my name. I looked back through the glass doors at the ballroom we'd just left. At Marco's table, where he sat watching our departure with a smile that promised he'd already found a way around the rules Dante thought would protect me. At the hospital board members clustered together, no doubt discussing how quickly they could distance themselves from the surgeon who'd just become a mob wife. At the life I'd built crumbling in real time while cameras captured every moment for tomorrow's headlines. Dante opened the car door, and I slid inside, the ring catching the streetlight like a warning flare. I'd said yes to save my life. But looking at Marco's smile through the ballroom windows, I wondered if I'd just agreed to a different kind of death sentence. One that came with a diamond and a vow and the certain knowledge that in Dante's world, love was just another word for leverage. And I just made myself the most valuable leverage in the city. I woke to my phone vibrating off Dante's nightstand at 6 a.m., the screen lit with 43 missed calls. The proposal video had gone viral overnight. 3 million views and climbing. Mafia boss's romantic gesture stuns charity gala. Read one headline. Dr. Sophia Russo, the surgeon who captured a crime lord's heart, read another. My mother's text was simpler. Call me immediately. What have you done? I sat up in Dante's bed, our bed now I supposed, and scrolled through the carnage. Hospital administration. News outlets. Medical school classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. Every call a variation of the same question. How could you? Dante emerged from the bathroom, already dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Don't answer any of them. I have to. I have a shift in 3 hours. You're not going to the hospital today. Yes, I am. I stood, searching for my dress from last night. I'm a surgeon. People's lives depend on. Your life depends on you not being predictable right now. Marco knows your schedule. He knows you park in the east garage, take the stairs to avoid small talk, stop for coffee at the same cart every morning. Dante's voice was flat, factual. He's had 3 years to learn your patterns. Don't make it easy for him. My phone rang again. Dr. Patricia Reeves. I answered before Dante could stop me. My office. 9 a.m. Non-negotiable. Patricia hung up before I could respond. I went to the hospital anyway, surrounded by 2 of Dante's men who looked severely out of place in the surgical wing. Nurses stared. Residents whispered. A patient's family member took a photo that would probably be on social media within the hour. Patricia's office door was closed when I arrived. Through the glass, I could see her with 3 hospital board members, their faces grave. She opened the door without greeting. Close it behind you. I did. The board members didn't stand. Dr. Russo, Patricia began, her voice carrying none of the warmth I'd known for 5 years. You're engaged to Dante Moretti, a man currently under federal investigation for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. A man whose organization is directly responsible for 30% of the trauma cases that come through our doors. My personal life. Your personal life became our institutional liability the moment you accepted that ring. She slid a folder across her desk. These are gunshot victims you've treated in the last 6 months. Recognize any names? I opened it. Saw faces I remembered from men I'd saved without asking questions because that's what doctors do. Anthony Ricci. Michael Costello. James DeLuca. Patricia tapped each photo. All Moretti family soldiers. All treated by you. All within 24 hours of violent incidents tied to organized crime. I treat everyone who comes through my doors. Were you sleeping with Dante Moretti when you treated these men? The room went silent. Yes, I said quietly. But that didn't influence my medical decisions. I would have treated them regardless. Would you have failed to report gunshot wounds to the authorities as required by law? My stomach dropped. Those reports were filed. 4 hours late. After someone had time to clean up crime scenes. After witnesses disappeared. Patricia leaned forward. You gave them a window, Sophia. Whether you meant to or not. I was saving lives. You were protecting your boyfriend's organization. She pulled out another document. The board wants you terminated. Effective immediately. You can't do that. We can and we will, unless you resign voluntarily. Save yourself the scandal of being fired. I looked at the board members, at their carefully neutral faces, and saw the truth. They'd already decided. This meeting was a formality. I'm one of your best trauma surgeons. You're also engaged to a crime lord who uses our hospital as his personal medical facility. The liability alone. Patricia shook her head. I fought for you. But I can't protect you from this. You made your choice when you said yes to that proposal. I walked out of her office into a hospital I'd called home for 5 years, knowing I'd never work there again. In the parking garage, 2 men in cheap suits waited by my car. FBI badges. Grim expressions. Dr. Russo, the taller one said. Special Agent Rachel Torres. We need to discuss your new circumstances. I looked at them, at the hospital behind me, at the ring on my finger that had destroyed everything in less than 12 hours. I have nothing to say. You will, Torres replied. Everyone does, eventually. They took me to a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital, the kind of anonymous chain where FBI agents could have conversations that ruined lives over mediocre lattes. Torres spread photos across the small table like a dealer showing cards. Crime scenes. Bodies. Men I'd treated in my or now photographed in morgues. Anthony Ricci. You saved his life after he was shot in a territory dispute. He went on to kill 2 people in retaliation. She tapped the next photo. Michael Costello. You removed a bullet from his shoulder. 3 weeks later, he orchestrated a warehouse fire that killed a rival family shipment crew. I stared at my coffee, watching steam rise and dissipate. James DeLuca, Torres continued. You performed emergency surgery that salvaged his spleen. He's currently awaiting trial for kidnapping and murder. Your medical skills gave these men second chances to commit more violence. I'm a doctor. I don't get to choose who deserves treatment. No. But you chose to sleep with their boss. Torres pulled out another folder. Thicker. We've been building a RICO case against the Moretti family for 3 years. And for 3 years, you've been in Dante Moretti's bed, his home, his inner circle. You've seen things, heard things. I haven't. Don't insult me. Her voice hardened. You're a trauma surgeon. You see patterns. You notice details. It's what makes you good at your job. And you're telling me in 3 years, you never noticed anything about Dante's business. I had. Of course I had. The late-night calls he took in Italian. The meetings that ended with men looking scared. The way money moved through his legitimate businesses like water through a sieve. The packages I wasn't supposed to see. The conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. I'd noticed everything and chosen to look away because looking meant choosing, and I'd wanted to believe I could love him without being complicit in what he did. We can protect you, Torres said, sliding a final document across the table. Immunity agreement. Witness protection. A new life away from all of this. You wear a wire for 6 months, document his activities, testify, and you walk away clean. And Dante goes to prison for life. Dante Moretti is a murderer who's evaded justice for a decade. Yes, he goes to prison. That's the point. I looked at the immunity agreement, at the promise of safety written in legal language. At the price. Betraying the man I love to save myself. No, I said. Think carefully. I said no. I stood, leaving the photos scattered across the table. I'm not wearing a wire. Then you're complicit in everything he does going forward. Every body, every crime, every drop of blood, that's on you now. Torres stood too, her expression hard. And when this ends badly, and it will end badly, don't expect us to save you. I walked out into afternoon sun that felt accusatory. That night, I found Dante in his study, surrounded by ledgers and phones, orchestrating the violence Torres wanted me to document. The FBI approached me, I said from the doorway. He didn't look surprised. What did you tell them? No. Why? He finally looked up. You could have saved yourself. Walked away clean. Because I love you. Because I made my choice 3 years ago. I moved into the room. But I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Why did you really propose in front of everyone? Dante closed the ledger, his face unreadable. Marco Vitali has been planning a coup for 6 months. Gathering supporters, making alliances, waiting for the right moment to move against me. I know that part. What you don't know is that his plan involved killing you first. Publicly. Brutally. To prove I was weak, that I'd let personal feelings compromise my leadership. His voice stayed level, clinical. He was going to torture you to death and leave your body where I'd find it. Make me choose between grief and retaliation, knowing either choice would destroy me. The words hit like physical blows. When? Within the week. My sources confirmed it 2 days ago. He stood, moved toward me. Under our law, harming a boss's declared fiancé means automatic war. Every family would be obligated to retaliate. Marco's ambitious, but he's not ready to fight everyone. The proposal made you untouchable. Or made me a bigger target. You were already a target. You just didn't know it. His hand cupped my face. This way at least you have protection. This way you have a chance. I looked at him, this man who'd orchestrated my protection by destroying my career, my reputation, my life as I knew it. I was never safe, was I? I whispered. Not from the moment I fell in love with you. No, he said simply. You weren't. I packed my apartment in 20 minutes. 2 of Dante's men standing guard while I threw clothes into suitcases I'd bought for a medical conference I'd never attend now. You can come back for the rest later, the taller one said, though we both knew I wouldn't. The compound sat on 15 acres outside the city, hidden behind walls that looked decorative but could stop bullets. Iron gates opened to reveal a driveway lined with manicured hedges and men in suits with visible weapons. The house itself was a contradiction. Classical Italian architecture built like a fortress, marble columns that could provide cover, windows that I suspected were bulletproof. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Your wing is on the 3rd floor, Dante said, leading me through halls lined with art that probably cost more than my medical school debt. Private bedroom, bathroom, office. You'll have space. Space in a prison. Space in a fortress where Mako can't reach you. He stopped at a heavy door, produced a key. The guards rotate every 6 hours. They're under orders to keep you alive, not keep you happy. My new bedroom was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens patrolled by armed men. A bed that could sleep 4. Closet already stocked with clothes in my size that I'd never chosen. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Since I realized Mako knew about you. Dante set my suitcase down. Since I accepted that keeping you separate from my world was impossible. That night, I met his inner circle over dinner in a formal dining room that felt like a boardroom. Antonio Greco, his consigliere, watched me with calculating eyes. Vincent Caruso, head of security, assessed me like a threat assessment. For other men whose names I forgot immediately, their faces hard with years of violence I'd only seen the aftermath of. To the future Mrs. Moretti, Antonio toasted, his smile not reaching his eyes. May she bring our family nothing but prosperity. The unspoken threat was clear. If I didn't, I was expendable. After dinner, they gathered in Dante's study for business I wasn't invited to observe. But the walls were thick, not soundproof. I heard raised voices. A man pleading. Antonio's cold response about setting examples. Then silence. Then the sound of something heavy being dragged across marble floors toward the basement stairs. I stood in my beautiful prison, listening to someone disappear into the violence Dante orchestrated, and understood with absolute clarity. This was my life now. Every day. Every night. Until Mako was dead or we were. In the bathroom, I stared at the pregnancy test I'd bought 3 days ago and never had the courage to take. My hands shook as I opened it, as I followed the instructions I could recite from medical training. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. 2 lines. Positive. I was pregnant with Dante Moretti's child. Engaged to a mafia boss. Trapped in a compound surrounded by men who killed for a living. Unemployed. Under FBI surveillance. Targeted by a coup I barely understood. And I hadn't even told him yet. Didn't know if I should. Because bringing a child into this world, into his world, felt like the cruelest choice I could make. But the alternative meant choosing alone, meant running, meant raising a baby while looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Still me, still the doctor who'd spent her career saving lives, now carrying a life conceived in darkness. A knock on the door. Sophia. Dante's voice. You okay? I hid the test in the trash, buried under tissues. Fine. Just tired. Get some rest. Tomorrow you meet the family lawyer. We need to discuss prenuptial agreements, asset protection. Asset protection. Like I was another acquisition to be managed. Another piece in the chess game he played with people's lives. Dante. I called before he could leave. Yes. I almost told him. Almost showed him the test. Almost shared the truth that would change everything. Nothing. Good night. I heard his footsteps fade down the hall, heard the compound settle into its nighttime rhythms of patrol shifts and surveillance cameras and armed men protecting a woman who wasn't sure she wanted to be saved. In the trash, under tissues, a pregnancy test showed 2 lines. And I had no idea how to tell the father that we'd created a life in the middle of a war. I was 3 steps from my car when Dr. James Chen called my name. Sophia, wait up. He jogged across the parking garage, his white coat billowing. I wanted to apologize for earlier. The board meeting. I should have defended you. It's fine, James. You have a career to protect. The explosion cut off the rest. One moment James was beside me, apologizing. The next, he was airborne, thrown backward by a fireball that erupted from beneath my Honda. Heat seared my face. The concussion wave knocked me flat. Car alarms screamed. Smoke and flames and the smell of burning rubber, burning metal, burning flesh. My ears rang. Couldn't hear. Couldn't think. Medical training kicked in through the shock. Assess yourself first, then help others. I pushed up on shaking arms. Nothing broken. Burns on my hands and face. Minor. Smoke inhalation. Manageable. James lay 15 feet away. Not moving. I crawled to him through debris and shattered glass. His injuries were catastrophic. 3rd-degree burns over 60% of his body. Visible shrapnel wounds, likely internal bleeding. I pressed fingers to his carotid, searching for a pulse I knew I wouldn't find. Nothing. James Chen, father of 2, brilliant cardiologist, dead because he'd been walking beside me when someone tried to kill me. Hospital security arrived first, then paramedics, then police. I let them lead me inside, let them treat my minor burns while I stared at my hands covered in James's blood. Marco didn't care about Mafia law. Didn't care that killing Dante's fiancée meant war. He was willing to risk everything to remove me, and he just murdered an innocent man to prove it. The ER became chaos. 3 other victims from the blast. Burn patients I'd normally treat but couldn't because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dr. Reeves found me in the supply closet, hyperventilating. James is dead because of me, I managed. James is dead because someone planted a bomb. That's not on you. But her eyes said otherwise. Said I'd brought this violence to their doorstep. Dante arrived within the hour, surrounded by guards who turned the ER into an armed camp. He found me still in the supply closet, still covered in James's blood. We're leaving. Now. I can't just leave, there are patients. There are cameras everywhere showing you survived. Marco knows his attempt failed. He'll try again. Dante pulled me up. We're going home before he gets another chance. That night, I watched the news from the compound's living room. 3 bodies found in a warehouse. Execution style. Known associates of Marco Vitali. Dante's retaliation. By morning, it was 5 bodies. By evening, 7. Marco's people, killed methodically, publicly, a message written in blood that said, "Touch what's mine and die." "This has to stop," I said, watching another crime scene flash across the screen. "You're starting a war." Marco started it when he planted that bomb. I'm finishing it. By killing everyone he knows? By turning the city into a battlefield. By making it clear that you are untouchable. That attempting to harm you means death. Dante turned off the television. This is how my world works, Sophia. Someone threatens what's mine. I eliminate the threat. Completely. I looked at him, at the cold certainty in his eyes, and realized, this would never end. Marco or someone else, there would always be another threat, another attempt, another body count climbing because I'd said yes to a ring. "I'm pregnant," I said. The words hung between us like a detonation of their own. Dante went completely still. "How long have you known?" "Since the day after the proposal. I didn't know how to tell you. Didn't know if I should bring a child into." I gestured at the blank television screen, at the violence it had been showing. "This." He crossed to me, his hands gentle on my face despite everything. "Then we end this quickly. Before our child is born into a war." "How?" "By making Marco's next move his last one." His hand moved to my stomach, protective. "By ensuring you and our baby are safe, whatever it costs." I thought of James Chen's body. Of the 7 people dead in retaliation. Of the child growing inside me who would be born into a world where car bombs and executions were just the cost of loving the wrong person. What if that's not possible? I whispered. What if there is no safe? Not for us. Then I burn down everyone who threatens you until safe is all that's left. His voice was absolute, terrifying in its certainty. Marco wanted war. He's going to get one. And when it's over, he'll be dead and you'll be protected. He kissed my forehead and left to plan more violence, more death. More bodies that would stack up because I'd survived when James Chen hadn't. I sat alone in the compound, one hand on my belly where our daughter was growing, and wondered what kind of mother brought a child into a world this dark. What kind of mother I was becoming. They brought the wounded in at 3 a.m., blood trailing across Dante's marble floors like accusations. I woke to shouting, running footsteps, Dante's voice cold and commanding. By the time I reached the hallway, they were carrying the first man toward the basement. His shirt soaked crimson, his breathing shallow and wrong. "Sophia." Dante caught my arm. "I need you. Call an ambulance. Marco has people watching every hospital. FBI is watching closer. These men go to an ER, they die in custody or in their beds." His grip tightened. "Please." The basement had been converted into something between a wine cellar and a bunker. Now it was an improvised operating room, steel table, surgical lights someone had installed while I slept, equipment that looked suspiciously new and comprehensive. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, staring at the autoclave, the monitors, the supplies that could stock a small clinic. "Since the moment I brought you here." Dante helped them lay the first man on the table. "I knew eventually you'd have to choose. 5 men. Gunshot wounds to the chest, abdomen, thigh. One with a tension pneumothorax collapsing his lung. Another bleeding out from a severed femoral artery. The kind of trauma I'd trained years to handle, now happening in a basement surrounded by armed men instead of trained nurses. "I can't do this alone," I said, assessing the carnage. "I need an anesthesiologist, a surgical team." "You have me." Antonio Greco appeared, rolling up his sleeves. "Vietnam. Field medic. I can follow orders." "And me," Vincent added. "Army trauma unit. 2 tours." I looked at them, at these men who killed for a living offering to help me save lives, and understood. This was the line. Cross it, and I stopped being a doctor who happened to love a criminal. I became part of the organization. Complicit. Involved. If they die, it's because their injuries were too severe, not because I refused to help, I heard myself say. Get me gloves. I operated for 6 hours. Removed bullets with Antonio holding retractors. Repaired a perforated bowel while Vincent monitored vitals. Placed a chest tube with hands that shook from exhaustion and adrenaline and the weight of what I was doing. The man with the femoral bleed almost didn't make it. I held pressure on the artery while Antonio sutured, watching his blood pressure drop, watching him slip away despite everything I did. Then suddenly the bleeding stopped, the pressure stabilized, and he gasped awake like resurrection. By dawn, all 5 were stable. Alive. Because I'd used my skills to save the men who'd been shot executing Dante's orders in his war with Marco. I stood at the industrial sink, scrubbing blood from my hands, my arms, the splatter on my face. Dante appeared beside me, silent. I can't keep pretending I'm separate from this, I said, watching pink water swirl down the drain. I'm in it. We both know I've been in it for years. You saved their lives. I saved your soldiers. I operated in your basement. I used my medical training to help you fight a gang war. I turned to face him, still covered in blood that wasn't mine. There's no neutral ground anymore. There never was. No, he agreed quietly. There wasn't. Those men upstairs, they'll go back to killing for you. Maybe one of them will end up in someone else's or another doctor's problem. Maybe they'll kill someone who has a family, someone who matters. I pulled off the bloody gloves, threw them in the medical waste bin Antonio had somehow procured. And I made that possible. You made their survival possible. What they do after is on them. Is it? I laughed, a sound without humor. Or is it on me now? Every choice they make because I gave them a second chance. Dante pulled me close despite the blood, despite everything. Welcome to my world, amore. Where every choice is wrong and you learn to live with it anyway. I pressed my face against his chest and felt the weight of what I'd become settle like a diagnosis I couldn't cure. Somewhere upstairs, 5 men breathed because of me. And somewhere in this city, Marco Vitali was planning his next move, knowing now that Dante's fiancée wasn't just his weakness. She was his field medic too. The meeting was held at Salvatore's, a restaurant that closed to the public every 3rd Wednesday for business that had nothing to do with food. You're not coming, Dante said as his men prepared the cars. Yes, I am. I was already dressed in black, understated, the ring impossible to miss. If I'm your fiancé, I need to be visible. Hiding me makes you look weak. Bringing you makes you a target. I'm already a target. At least this way, they see I'm not afraid. I met his eyes. And neither are you. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Stay close. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And if shooting starts, Antonio gets you out first. The restaurant's private room held 20 men and a violence so thick you could taste it. The 5 families, each boss flanked by their most trusted. I recognized faces from crime scene photos, from whispered conversations in hospital hallways, from news coverage of trials that never quite resulted in convictions. These were the men who controlled the city. Who decided which politicians won elections, which businesses succeeded, which bodies ended up in my trauma bay. Dante guided me to a chair beside his at the head of the table. Every eye in the room tracked the movement, assessing, calculating. Marco Vitali sat at the opposite end, his smile sharp as surgical steel. Dante. Dr. Russo. How domestic. You called this meeting, Marco, Dante said, voice flat. Make your point. My point is that our organization thrives on strength. On loyalty. On understanding that family comes before everything. Marco stood, pulling out a folder. And I'm concerned that your recent romantic entanglement represents a dangerous weakness. He slid photos across the table. Crime scene images. Hospital records I recognized with sickening clarity. Dr. Russo has treated members of every family in this room, Marco continued. Caruso soldiers. Benedetti men. Even members of the Vitali family. She saves lives without discrimination, which sounds noble until you realize she's been passing our people's information to anyone who bleeds on her table. That's not, I started. Dante's hand on my arm silenced me. She's a doctor, he said calmly. She treats patients. That's not betrayal, it's professional ethics. Is it? Marco pulled out more documents. Because according to these hospital logs, she delayed reporting gunshot wounds on 17 occasions. All Moretti soldiers. All within hours of operations against rival families. She gave you time to clean up crime scenes, eliminate witnesses, cover tracks. Several bosses leaned forward, interested now. She protected your organization while treating ours, Marco continued. That's not neutrality. That's choosing sides. And now you want to marry her? Bring an outsider into our world who's already proven she can't be trusted to remain neutral. My fiancé's medical career is not your concern, Dante replied, but I could hear the edge in his voice. He was losing them. Your fiancé's loyalties are all our concern. Marco looked directly at me. Tell me, doctor, when you treated Vincent Caruso's nephew last month, did you happen to mention to Dante that the boy was running drugs through the waterfront? The same waterfront Dante's been trying to control. I hadn't. The conversation had been doctor-patient privilege. But my silence now looked like confirmation. She's a liability, Marco pressed. She knows too much about all of us. She's seen our men at their most vulnerable. And now she's carrying information directly into the Moretti compound every day. He turned to the other bosses. How long before the FBI flips her? Before she trades what she knows for immunity? The FBI already tried, I said, ignoring Dante's warning grip. I refused. This time, Marco countered. What about when they threaten your medical license? Your freedom? What happens when loving Dante isn't enough and you choose self-preservation? Silence fell across the table. I watched faces I'd seen in my or turn cold, calculating. Saw them weighing Marco's words against their own vulnerabilities. Dante stood, commanding attention. My personal life is not up for vote. Sophia will be my wife. Anyone who has a problem with that can address it directly to me. But I could see it in their eyes. The doubt, the calculation, the slow erosion of support. Marco smiled like he'd already won. Just wanted everyone to understand what we're dealing with. An outsider who knows too much, protected by a boss who's letting personal feelings cloud his judgment. The meeting ended with carefully neutral farewells that felt like threats. In the car, Dante's jaw was tight. He's turning them against me. Against us. He's right though, I said quietly. I am a liability. I do know too much. You're my fiancé. That makes you family. To you. Not to them. I looked at the ring catching streetlight. To them, I'm just the weakness Marco's been waiting for. The call came 3 days later. Antonio's voice tight with urgency. Emergency meeting. All families. Marco's calling a vote of no confidence. Dante was already moving. Already armed. It's too soon. He doesn't have the support. He says he has evidence. Says it changes everything. We returned to Salvatore's to find the private room packed with every significant player in the city's underworld. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Electric. Dangerous in a way that made my surgical instincts scream warnings. Marco stood at the head of the table, a laptop open before him. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I think you'll find this worth your time. He pressed play. Audio filled the room, Dante's voice, discussing shipments, territories, the elimination of a rival crew. Then another conversation, about laundering money through legitimate businesses. Another about paying off judges. 3 years of recorded conversations, Mako announced. Detailed documentation of every operation, every crime, every violation that could put us all away for life. He paused for effect. I've been working with the FBI, building a RICO case. Against all of us. The room erupted. Bosses shouting, hands reaching for weapons, chairs scraping as men stood. Sit down, Mako commanded, and something in his voice made them obey. I'm offering you a deal. We eliminate Dante and his liability fiancé. Install new leadership that's actually competent. And I ensure the FBI investigation dies. The evidence disappears. We all walk away clean. Your FBI? The Benedetti boss looked murderous. You're a rat. I'm a pragmatist. Dante's weakness was going to bring us all down. I merely positioned myself to control the outcome. Marco's smile was cold. Vote now. Dante dies, or we all go to prison. I watched faces around the table calculate, consider. Saw loyalty crumble under the weight of self-preservation. Then Antonio's phone buzzed. He checked it, went pale. It's a lie. Marco's not FBI. He fabricated. Gunfire cut him off. The room exploded into chaos. Marco's men against Dante's, families choosing sides in real time, bullets tearing through expensive suits and older loyalties. Dante grabbed me, Vincent and Antonio forming a shield as we fought toward the exit. Outside, more gunfire. Marco had positioned men throughout the restaurant, throughout the street. This wasn't a meeting. It was an ambush. We made it to the cars through a hail of bullets that shattered windows and dropped 2 of Dante's men. The driver floored it, weaving through traffic while Vincent called ahead to the compound. Sir, we have a problem, he said, listening to the response. FBI raids. They're hitting all our locations simultaneously. Mako timed it, Dante said grimly. Even if he's not cooperating, he's using the FBI as cover for the coup. We arrived at the compound to find it under siege. Marco's forces at the gates, FBI agents establishing a perimeter beyond them, our own men caught between 2 threats they couldn't shoot at. Safe room, Dante ordered. Now. The safe room was in the basement, steel reinforced, designed to withstand anything short of military assault. Dante ushered me inside, started to follow. An explosion rocked the compound. The lights died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red. Go! Vincent shouted, pushing Dante back. Protect her. We'll hold them. The door sealed with a hydraulic hiss, locking me inside with Dante and 2 guards. Security monitors showed Marco's men breaching the perimeter, FBI agents confused by the chaos, our defenders falling back. Then one monitor showed Marco himself, moving through the compound with lethal purpose, heading straight for the basement. He knows where we are, I whispered. Dante was already moving, positioning guards, checking weapons. He designed this room with me. He knows every. The ventilation grate exploded inward. Gas canisters tumbled through, hissing white smoke that burned my eyes and throat. The guards collapsed, choking. Dante pulled me toward the sealed door, trying the emergency release. Nothing. Marco had disabled it from outside. The smoke cleared enough to see him standing in the ventilation shaft, gun leveled at my head. Hello, Dante, Marco said pleasantly. Let's discuss terms of your surrender. Dante raised his hands, weaponless, his eyes never leaving Marco's gun. You wanted my position. You have it. Let her go. And have her testify about everything she's seen? Everything she knows. Marco dropped into the room, keeping the gun trained on me. No. She's the reason you're weak. The reason you made mistakes. She dies, you die, and I rebuild without your catastrophic judgment calls. The families won't support you after this. You lied about the FBI. The families will support whoever survives. That's how this works. Marco's finger tightened on the trigger. On your knees, Dante. Watch her die, then join her. Dante started to kneel, his eyes meeting mine with something that looked like goodbye. And I realized with absolute clarity. Marco had forgotten I'd spent 3 years dating a man who'd taught me things doctors don't learn, including where he kept the backup gun in every room he'd designed. Marco's attention was entirely on Dante, savoring his victory, waiting for the submission he'd orchestrated for months. He'd forgotten I was a surgeon. That I noticed details. That precision under pressure was what I did. His finger rested alongside the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. Safer carry position, less chance of accidental discharge. His weight was forward, anticipating Dante's compliance. And his eyes were watching Dante kneel, not watching my hands. I moved the way I did in surgery. Fast. Precise. No hesitation. My hand shot up, deflecting the gun's barrel away from my head. My other hand found the backup piece Dante had shown me 3 months ago, hidden in a recessed panel I could reach from exactly where Marco had positioned me. Training took over, the hours Dante had insisted I spend at his private range, learning to shoot despite my protests. Muscle memory and survival instinct. I fired twice into Marco's chest, center mass, the way Dante had taught me. Marco's expression shifted from triumph to shock to nothing as he fell. The gun was still in my hand, still raised, when Dante reached me. His fingers closed over mine, gently lowering my arm, removing the weapon. "Breathe," he said. I couldn't. My medical training was screaming. Check for pulse, assess injuries, apply pressure, start CPR. I'd spent my entire career saving people. Every instinct demanded I drop to my knees and try to save the man I'd just shot. "He's dying," I whispered. "I need to." "No." Dante's hand cupped my face, forcing me to look at him instead of Marco's body. "You don't save this one, amore. This one dies." Marco's breathing went shallow, then stopped. I watched it happen with clinical detachment, noting the signs of hypovolemic shock, the progression toward death I'd fought against countless times. This time I'd caused it. The compound sounds filtered back. Gunfire stopping, sirens, shouting. Vincent appeared at the safe room door. "Sir, Marco's men are surrendering. And the lawyers just arrived with something you need to see." The FBI raid collapsed within hours. Dante's legal team presented evidence that Marco had fabricated the recordings, that his cooperation was an elaborate fiction designed to trigger family conflict and seize power. The actual FBI agents conducting the raid looked as confused as everyone else. That evening, what remained of the 5 families gathered in the compound's dining room. I sat beside Dante, visibly shaking, Marco's blood still under my fingernails despite scrubbing. The Benedetti boss spoke first. "Your woman killed Marco Vitali." "She defended her family," Dante replied. "She's an outsider who just murdered a made man." "She's my wife." Dante's voice carried absolute certainty. "She acted to protect what's hers. That's not weakness. That's strength." Silence. Then Antonio raised his glass. "To Sofia Moretti, who proved she's exactly where she belongs." One by one they drank. Accepting. Acknowledging. I'd killed my way into their world's respect. That night, alone in our bedroom, I stared at my hands. The ones that had saved hundreds of lives. The ones that had taken one. "I'm a doctor," I whispered. Dante sat beside me, pulling me close. "You're my wife. And the mother of my child. You're both. You've always been both. I killed him. You survived him. There's a difference." I pressed my face against his shoulder and let myself break, Let the weight of what I'd done and what I'd become crash over me in waves. "I'm pregnant," I finally said. "I found out the day after the proposal. I didn't know how to tell you." His hand moved to my stomach, protective. "Then we end this war properly. Make the city safe before our child arrives." 6 months later, I stood in St. Michael's Trauma Bay, 7 months pregnant and treating a gunshot victim I recognized as one of the Caruso soldiers. The hospital board had wanted me gone, but Dante's lawyers had made it clear. Terminating me meant admitting they'd known about my relationship all along, opening themselves to liability. So I stayed, pregnant and practicing, the surgeon who'd married into organized crime. At home that evening, I walked through our compound, past guards who nodded respectfully, through halls being renovated to include a nursery, into a dining room where Dante's mother had cooked enough pasta to feed 20 people. Family dinner. Men discussing territories and tributes while passing garlic bread. Their wives talking about children and schools and normal things, as if their husbands didn't orchestrate violence for profit. I sat beside Dante, his hand finding mine under the table, his thumb brushing the ring I still wore. After dinner, we stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Lights stretched to the horizon, beautiful and indifferent to the darkness we carried. "Do you regret it?" Dante asked. Saying yes. I touched my belly, felt our daughter kick. Thought of Marco's body falling. Of the 5 men I'd saved in the basement. Of the impossible balance I'd learned to maintain. "I regret that I didn't understand what I was saying yes to," I said carefully. "I thought I could love you without joining your world. I was wrong. And now I know better." I looked at him, this man who destroyed my old life to save my new one. "I don't regret loving you, even if it means living in a world that destroys everything it touches." "We're not destroyed. Not yet." I smiled, dark and knowing. "But we're not finished yet either." We stood there watching the city lights, 2 people who'd chosen each other despite, or because of, the darkness we carried. My hands had saved lives and taken one. His had built an empire on violence. Together, we were creating something new. A life, a family, a future written in shades of gray. Whether it was love or mutual destruction remained unwritten. But for now, in this moment we had each other. We had the fragile piece we'd carved from violence. We had a daughter on the way who would be born into this impossible world we'd built. And sometimes that was enough. Below us, the city breathed and bled and survived, the way cities do. Inside me, our daughter kicked again, insistent and alive. I was a doctor who'd killed to protect what was hers. I was a wife to a man who ruled through fear. I was a mother-to-be planning a nursery in a fortress. I was all of these things and none of them separately anymore. And I'd finally stopped pretending there was any other way to be. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed this story, you're going to love what's coming next. It's wilder, deeper, and full of twists you won't see coming. So go ahead, like the video, drop a comment, and hit subscribe. Get ready, because the next story is about to blow your mind.